Pfizer asks for the green light for its vaccine in young kids. Elon Musk moving Tesla to Texas. And Love Hate 8 to end the week. Friday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Friday, October 8th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hello. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday talk to you, Jill. I'll tell you guys out there. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm on no sleep. For some reason, I could not sleep last night. And I need to sleep if I'm going to get 100% better. So I'm not happy with myself.
That is the worst. No, it's the same over here. Well, I'm walking on sunshine over here today because this just in, guess what? The Franimal herself took a bottle from the old man last night for the first time. Woohoo!
Really? That for the first time? Wow. That's big news.
Yeah. It is indeed. She had not had any interest in that, and she did it. And I was like VE Day over here. I was running through Times Square, kissing nurses. I was so happy. But yes, so that was so very good news over here.
With a mask on, I hope, Carlo.
Of course, yes.
Pfizer has formally requested an FDA approval for its vaccine in kids aged 5 to 11, assuming the FDA's timeline is similar to what it took to authorize that vaccine for older kids. The shots would become available to younger children in early November, about a month from now. The regimen would be the same, 2 doses spaced a few weeks apart, but with smaller quantities of the vaccine in each. It's about a third the dose. So that's pretty good if parents give it to their kids.
That's the question, right? But you see that, folks? That's a light at the end of the tunnel there. I see it. It's getting a little bit closer every day. We're below 100,000 cases, new cases a day now. Not that that's like anything to shake a stick at, I guess, but it is good. I mean, it's better than 200,000, right? I wanted to mention this yesterday, and I forgot. We're actually at more people have died of the coronavirus in 2021 now than died in 2020. Of course, 2021 being a year where vaccines were widely available almost from the beginning. So that's a little bit of a depressing statistic. But anyway, just a couple other sort of COVID headlines I wanted to just get on the record with here. Moderna says that they're going to open a manufacturing vaccine plant in Africa. They haven't decided where, but that could go a long way towards getting more of these vaccines to places that need it, specifically in Africa, though it would take a while for it to actually build that plant. San Francisco. That's a city where 75% of the population is fully vaccinated. They're going to start to ease some of their masking requirements, which have been among sort of the most stringent in the country. But California as a whole is doing really well, actually, as many states now are. And also this, 400,000 people a day now are getting their booster shots. That's according to the CDC. That's much more than how many people are getting their first doses. So make of that what you will. But it's also just a reminder. I've been meaning to ask my parents if they've gotten theirs. Have your parents gotten theirs yet?
Yes.
Their boosters?
Yes.
Yeah. I got to get I got to make sure my folks are doing what they got to do there. And finally, just something that, because I know we've been talking about this forever, 2 real-world studies published yesterday showing that those inexpensive HEPA filters that actually do a very good job in removing viral particles from the air, that could be very important for hospitals, of course. And we've talked about, forever about how ventilation is sort of one of these things that has been sort of underappreciated in the arsenal of tools we have, right?
Dr. Ashish Jha of Brown was interviewed on NBC News, and he was saying he thinks it's just a matter of time before those boosters are going to be approved for young, healthy people as well. Bloomberg did a report about life in Tel Aviv right now, where, as I mentioned earlier this week, 3 vaccines. So the booster is what you need to be considered fully vaccinated, and they have it's all electronic, so you can't really go into restaurants and participate in social activities indoors without having the 3 doses of the vaccine. And in the article, it was just like life is now back to normal, because that booster did so much. Now, the question is for how long? Is there going to be another variant? Blah, blah, blah. But, it looks like in real life, the booster shot appears to do a lot.
I think it's possible that when all is said and done, these vaccines are going to be sort of thought of as 3-dose vaccines, right?
The Senate passed legislation to avoid a looming federal credit default after 11 Republicans joined all 50 Democrats to allow a vote on a short-term debt ceiling fix. That final vote passed with just Democratic support. after Mitch McConnell said the majority party needs to lift the debt ceiling on its own.
Okie dokie for all this political maneuvering. As we said yesterday, this vote just punts this whole charade until December, when Congress faces a deadline to fund the government for the next fiscal year. So bottom line, we can stop talking about this for 2 months. Next story.
A small group of U.S. troops has reportedly been operating covertly in Taiwan for at least a year. The Wall Street Journal reporting that about 24 special operations forces and Marines are helping train Taiwan's military amid a growing sense that China could be laying the groundwork for an invasion of that island. Taiwan's defense minister estimated this week that Beijing could have the capacity to launch a full-scale attack on Taiwan by 2025 with minimal casualties.
Beijing's propaganda newspaper, kind of like the mouthpiece for the Communist Party there, they put out this sort of crazy response to this story last night, quoting here, "Why just 24 members? Why secretly? The U.S. should send 240 servicemen publicly in U.S. military uniform and make public where they're stationed," end quote. So some fighting words there, sort of ratcheting up tensions. I've been arguing with our boss this week about whether the U.S. would actually defend Taiwan militarily if that were to happen, if there were actually to be an invasion. He was pointing to this piece in the Wall Street Journal to illustrate that we would, but I disagreed. As I said on this pod the other day, we got troops all over the place doing stuff like this, doing these kind of covert training missions. I still think there's virtually no chance that we would get involved if this were to happen. I just don't see it. It would be way too risky. This is China we're talking about, right? It's not, it's not Afghanistan, and that didn't go so well anyway. And I just don't think it would be politically popular. And again, just look at what we did or specifically didn't do when Beijing effectively took control of Hong Kong.
I completely agree. And our joke I think in the newsletter today is something like, guess they're not so covert anymore. But it's like, that's all we've been doing. I would have hoped we'd been doing more, to be completely honest. I mean, and obviously I'm sure there's a lot going on that we don't know.
Exactly right.
I mean, Carla, when you look at what happened even with the rift between France and the United States over selling those submarines to Australia, it all comes back to China. So I think the question is, how involved will the U.S. get? There are people who are now calling for the U.S. Josh Rogan, who as you know, he wrote a book about China, and he was on that Barry Weiss podcast, honestly, which I've been promoting. Someone actually wrote in, they're like, get someone to love you how much Jill loves this podcast. and it's true. It's like, so what is wrong with me? But he wrote a whole op-ed saying that he thinks that the U.S. shouldn't even send athletes to China for the Olympics that are coming up in a few months.
That is another question. That's another thing we got to start talking
about. And
he
said not only because of the human rights abuses that are going on in terms of the way that China's dealing with the Uyghur Muslims, but also, if you look at the military games that were going on in China early in basically the fall of 2019, there's now some pretty strong evidence that COVID was actually circulating at that point. And a lot of athletes got really sick. So the argument would be that, if China was hiding this virus and basically they probably knew about it and weren't telling anybody, a lot of these athletes got sick and then went back to their home countries. So are athletes at risk? I don't think the U.S. would actually boycott the Olympics here, but there are some people who are calling for the U.S. to do that.
It's an interesting debate to have. I mean, I sort of see both sides of it, right? So it would be sort of a shame for those athletes to miss out on another Olympics like this. But at the same time, at some point, you do got to put your foot down, right?
Elon Musk says he's moving Tesla's headquarters from California to Texas, making good on his threat from last year when he called California's COVID lockdowns fascist and said he would leave the state. Musk, who already moved himself from California to Texas, told shareholders that he made the decision because there's a limit to how big you can scale in the Bay Area. While Tesla HQ is going to move to Austin, the company's huge manufacturing plant that's in California will continue to expand. Tesla is also in the process of building out another big plant outside of Austin.
Yeah, this is a big one, right? Texas, I think, kind of a weird place to have an electric vehicle company, given that Tesla's entire business model of selling cars directly to consumers is actually banned in that state. They have a law in the books in Texas that you can't buy cars directly from the car maker as a way to protect, franchise car dealerships. Not to mention, of course, Texas has an electrical grid that is like on the precipice of failing, but I guess, at the same time, I mean, I guess he's making somewhat of a good point that it is just too expensive to sort of scale a business in Northern California these days. But I don't know.
I
What
mean,
are your
look,
thoughts?
as we're seeing this exodus of people, or this alleged exodus of people leaving New York and California and going to places like Texas and Florida, you do have to wonder, are the demographics that are going, which are, I would assume, more liberal, are they going to change the politics of those states, or are they just going to be fed up and leave and say this isn't for me, right? If you're a liberal Californian and you go to Texas with the voting rights issues and the abortion and everything else that's going on there, is that enough for you to just say, like, I don't want to live here? I don't know. And or do you then start voting and you change the politics? My friend who lives in Florida, who listens to this podcast, messaged me because we were talking about vaccine mandates, and she said I was supposed to go to she lives in Florida. She said I was supposed to go to the Dead and Co. concert tonight. I was looking forward to it for months. It got canceled because they had a vaccine mandate for the pit only. That second of general admission in front of the stage, and Florida, that section of general admission in front of the stage in Florida wouldn't have it because it's illegal for businesses to mandate vaccines here. Now, she is not picking up and moving back to New York, but it's
Right,
frustrating.
but it's so stupid. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And she
And
said there's no quarantine, so if somebody in school is exposed to, has close exposure with COVID, they're not quarantining anymore. Which, I mean, whatever. If you're asymptomatic, I think the rules around quarantine are going to change, actually, because 10 days, if you have it seems quite disruptive.
Yeah, I agree. Well, just quickly back to Musk. I mean, the thing about, California, for all of its problems, right? If you were in California 10 years ago, that was like the only place in America where you were actually seeing people drive around in Teslas. Like, they were the early adopters. Like, that company would not have become as successful as it did without the backing of Californians and without, the government sort of helping, the talent pool there and some of the tax incentives they got. So I don't know. It feels a little disloyal to me, frankly.
It feels to me like Florida's going to be the new Wall Street. New York is going to be, I think, the new Silicon Valley. When you look at Google and all of these tech companies buying up real estate, and I don't know what happens to California. If the weather stays good, I think people are still going to want to live there. But if these fires are still crazy, and I don't know.
That's the question, right?
Dave Chappelle facing a growing cascade of criticism over his latest Netflix stand-up special, particularly comments that he made about the LGBTQ plus people and specifically the transgender community. GLAAD condemned Chappelle for ridiculing trans people in his comedy, while the National Black Justice Coalition is calling on Netflix to pull the plug on the special entirely. People in the Jewish community also taking aim at one of his jokes called Space Jews. The Closer marks Chappelle's final special as part of his $60 million deal with Netflix.
Have you watched this yet?
I watched the first 5-10 minutes. And I didn't stop because of anything I thought was offensive. I just
had other stuff to do.
Yeah.
So I watched this as sort of homework for the pod last night. I thought, it was provocative. I'm a Dave Chappelle fan. I like him. I always have. I thought, he made some tasteless jokes. He often does. That's sort of part of his shtick. But I laughed. So, I mean, hopefully that doesn't mean I'm going to be arrested by the woke police today if they're not still hot on the case of figuring out why James Bond isn't a woman. But, in seriousness, these arguments about these, humor, criticisms of these things, I think it's totally fine to criticize. It's art. You can criticize it. You can critique it. I mean, it's out there in the public domain. Like, that's what it's for. But when it turns into this thing about, like, this is offensive, therefore it needs to go away, which is what this the National Black Justice Coalition is now saying, that's when you lose me, right? That's the censorship stuff. That's when I stop sort of listening to what you say.
So there was this Hugh Hewitt, who's a conservative analyst, and he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that I was reading while I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, saying it's time for Dr. Fauci to step down. Okay, just saying, it's been enough. And he actually made the example, which you mentioned the other day, where he was saying it's still debatable whether people are going to be able to get together with family over Christmas. And he was saying it's just like, it's enough. This was his argument. And you sort of made a similar argument.
Yeah, I think you could argue that.
And look, agree or disagree, nothing he said was, I think, out of bounds. And then I just for fun decided to read there were so many comments, and I was like, I'm curious what the response to this is going to be. And the number one response that I was reading was, Washington Post, why are you publishing this? Fire Hugh Hewitt. I'm going to unsubscribe. I'm tired of paying for, for whatever it is for my subscription if you're going to publish garbage like this. And it's like nothing. He's just a conservative who was saying, Dr. Fauci, love him or hate him, it's time to maybe have a new face for this thing. I'm not saying I even agree with it. It was like, why can't you say that? And isn't that good for public discourse? I mean, shouldn't we have that kind of debate? I don't know. And I almost wanted to write to those people like, what are you arguing for censorship? The Washington Post is one of what? Washington Post, New York Times. How many of these national newspapers do we have anymore that are really leading the discussion in terms of news and opinion? So they should all just, no conservative should be at all included in your opinion pieces. It's just, I was blown away by the responses.
No, I agree. Well, first of all, looking at the comments on anything on the internet is probably just a losing battle. But no, I agree. I mean, the New York Times, which is my newspaper, the newspaper I read every day. I mean, there's people on that staff on their op-ed section that I can't stand, and I think everything they write is like drivel. But I would never think that they shouldn't have the ability to write that. It's crazy.
All right, time for more to know before you go. The jobs report is coming out this morning. It's going to probably be out by the time that most people are listening to this. The expectations are about 500,000 people got new jobs for the month of September. That would be a big increase from 235,000 in August.
Yeah, hopefully this will be much better because I think a lot of people started going back to work in September, so we shall see. The Nobel Peace Prize just announced it was awarded to the journalists Maria Ressa of the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov of Russia for their efforts to advance freedom of expression. Ressa and Muratov founded independent news outlets that have both become popular sources for investigative journalism in those two respective countries.
Several U.S. sailors suffered minor injuries when their nuclear-powered submarine collided with an unknown object in the South China Sea. The USS Connecticut did not sustain any serious damage. AP reports that investigators have ruled out that the sub hit another sub.
On the Trump January 6th beat here, the former president's lawyers have told his former advisors not to comply with congressional investigators looking into the January 6th riot. Trump's legal team arguing that those advisors are protected under executive privilege. They could face criminal referrals as early today as the deadline for them to respond to the subpoenas in this investigation passed overnight.
President Biden's restoring 2 national monuments in Utah and another in New England that were reduced during the Trump administration. The executive order will restore the boundaries of the Beers Ears and the Grand Staircase, the monuments out west, plus a marine monument off the eastern seaboard.
And 18 former NBA players have been indicted on charges that they conspired to defraud the league's insurance plan. This is sort of a crazy indictment if you read it. Federal prosecutors alleging that the players, which include one-time Celtic stars Tony Allen and Glenn Big Baby Davis, filed fraudulent medical and dental claims over the course of several years and then pocketed those reimbursements to the tune of $4 million.
You read the reports about it, it's kind of wild. Some of them were filing claims. One of them was filing a claim for I think, root canal while he was playing a basketball game in Taiwan. And a few of them filed for the exact same claim of root canal on the same exact teeth. On the exact same day. But the question is, why would they do this? I mean, a lot of these players are made tens of millions of dollars while they were playing in the NBA. What is the motivation here?
A lot of these guys are journeyman players, right? But they're still making enough money that they shouldn't have to do this. I completely agree.
All right, time for a little love, hate, hate.
One thing we love this week, listening to long articles that we're just never going to get the chance to sit down and actually read. So I use this app that's called Matter. I archive everything that I want to read now and that I just don't have time to read during the week, and then I put it on this app, and then you can sort of play it as a voice, basically. So I do that like while we're making dinner. I was part of the beta test for this app, but now it's public on the App Store. I highly recommend it. So that now I listen to these articles, and I find that it's pretty useful. I didn't used to like this, but now I do. And I think my next step is going to be getting into audiobooks, Joel.
Are you secretly getting paid by this app here? Is there something you want to tell us?
I wish, but I really do like it, though. Seriously, it's great.
Fancy pants, part of the beta test.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
One thing that we hate when people regularly mispronounce easy words or say common phrases wrong, like espresso instead of espresso, especially, for all intensive purposes instead of for all intents and purposes, could care less instead of couldn't care less. And yes, we're not above this. We do this too. We're guilty of it.
Yes. The one that I always do that I know I shouldn't is I say literally when I mean like the opposite of literally. I think everybody does that though. But the couldn't care less, could care less. Yeah, right, exactly. What's the other one? The one that annoys me: fall between the cracks, right? Because it's like if something falls between the cracks, it's falling on the surface, right? Anyway, and finally, one thing that we ate, a side pickle, which of course the forgotten stepchild of any good sandwich. I always eat the pickle first, sort of like a little app for the main course. But I respect those who eat it after they consume the sandwich. But my one thing here is always the pickle spear. I hate when you ask for a pickle and you get the little like cylinders. You know what I mean? Like the little like chip slices. That's not as good. I need the dill spear, big chunky spear.
I love a good pickle. Okay, that is what you need to know for Friday, October 8th.
Have a good weekend, guys.